the toilets people, not toilets people. I know you'll be able to edit this. I'm just trying to remember the commission, Human Rights Commission people. What are they called?
People. The pissing police?
They basically are.
The problem is, Jonny, you said he was going to edit it, and then you said something really funny, like toilet people, and now there is no way in hell he's editing this out. We're talking about the issue of trans rights and recognition and all the rest of it, and yet we're spending a bunch of time talking about pissing.
Oh, why are you making it all about you? Why are you throwing it down our throats and going, actually, look, 17,000 articles were published and that wasn't even from us anyway.
The EHRC has undergone a process of essentially a form of radicalisation.
Hello and welcome to Bread and Rosaries, the only Christian left podcast to have got an invite to Taylor Swift's wedding. We will have all the news, views, and most importantly, Adam's opinion on the wedding dress. But Adam, give us a sneak peek. Out of 10, Taylor's wedding dress, what are we rating it?
I mean, she's a literal billionaire, so if it's anything lower than 10, I think everyone's going to be deeply disappointed. In fact, I would lose respect for her if her dress is bad. I haven't seen it, so I couldn't say.
Well, I think the thing is, no one's seen it, but I've decided to do it as though we have seen it because this episode isn't coming out immediately.
Right, sorry. Yes, the dress is stunning.
Yeah. And Jonny, Taylor Swift's husband that has an acquired brain injury from playing American football, whose name I can't remember. What did he make of his, I assume, tuxedo? Well, he plays American football for a living. And based on what I've seen of him. So, Jonny, what did you make of his tuxedo?
Fit.
I mean, again, in the same, like, if you are a man who is entirely made of muscle like that, it does seem like you should look good in a suit, right? Like,
absolutely,
that's a basic requirement.
I don't even know what he looks like.
Do you even know his name?
I don't know his name. I didn't know she was getting married.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where, like, you would recognise him stood next to her, but I genuinely suspect I wouldn't if, like, I saw a photo of him not with her.
He's a big white meathead football player, so like just insert that image into your mental image.
Yeah, and you're basically there, right? I mean, that's all that is. But I guess I hope she's happy. I don't know.
I don't recognise him. Just got a photo of him. No idea.
I think surely for Swifties out there, the concern is going to be actually that they hope that she's not happy because that's when the songs will dry up.
Yeah,
right?
True. Yeah. The Adele conundrum, as it's known. Enough of this nonsense. We should introduce the person we have joining us, who's had to sit here listening to our absolute shit, wondering what he signed himself up for. Hello, Seb. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I mean, married to Jonny, I think I'm used to dealing with absolute shit and listening to it anyway.
I have a feeling I'm just going to have an hour of being roasted by the three of you.
It is true. It does mean as well, Adam, that you're the only person whose partner has now not appeared on the podcast, and I genuinely think won't. Like, it would be great. But she would be so much fun. This
is the thing. She's got like really good knowledge of like really interesting things, but there's no way we'll get her on the pod. Not a chance.
Yeah, not a chance. Very, very sad. Yeah. Seb, apart from being married to Jonny, which is obviously your, most foundational personality trait, tell us a little bit else about who you are and what you do.
I mean, yeah, according to the church, that really is a foundational personality trait for a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So I work for the Methodist Church. I'm a lay employee as part of the connectional team. I'm a local preacher. And yeah, happy to be here. Had 10 years experience in education leading up to that, kind of teaching. So yeah, interesting ride.
10 years is pretty, like, these days, lasting 10 years is very impressive, right? In teaching, that is... Isn't the stats like 5 years is now the average?
Less,
or something
I think.
crazy?
It's something like 3
years, yeah.
Yeah, absolute madness. Yeah, don't be a teacher. The official advice.
I mean, that's still longer than most MPs. So,
really,
I mean, probably these days, right?
Yeah. Possibly longer than the average prime minister in the last 10 years, to be honest. Like,
Yeah.
Although, you can't, you've got to adjust for Liz Truss. In so many things, you have to adjust the statistics for Liz Truss.
I don't think it changes
It
a whole
brings the
lot,
average down.
She does.
It's like any of us going into a church, bringing the average age down.
Great barometer, though. Can you last longer than a lettuce?
Yeah.
Today we're going to do a lovely, fun, happy, clappy episode talking about the horrible rising wave of transphobia in the UK, because we like to make ourselves happy with what we talk about. So that is our plan for today, to delve into a little bit. There is an Amnesty International report that came out a little while back now that is gruesomely insightful about the scale and particularly the nature of the problem, and we will get into that in the main bit of the episode. But before that, we will start, as we always start, with what else is on my mind, Grapes.
What else is on my mind, Grapes?
Okay, so what else is on my mind, Grapes? I did say we were going to talk about pregnancy advice, and I think all of you looked at me like, how much pregnancy advice have you personally been getting? But actually, I want to talk about pregnant partner advice, okay? Because for listeners who don't know, I'm expecting a baby. Well, I'm not. My wife is. I'm doing very little.
I mean, technically, we're all expecting a baby, right?
Yeah. But anyway, the reason I want to talk about this is that we've got started like a few newsletters. There's like an app thing, all relatively like digital and therefore newfangled. I'm not talking about like books from 20 years ago here. And all this stuff has a little section of like advice for birthing partners. And it's all very 21st century, it's not husbands. It's very much birthing partners, very like gender inclusive language, or which is good. What's really funny though is that the advice in this inclusive language is then so 1960s you wouldn't believe it. So one of the early days' advice essentially amounted to birthing partners. She might not want sex, and actually, you're not actually entitled to sex. So maybe don't pester her constantly for sex. That was the genuine like advice about, and I was like, yeah, no, I do actually understand the concept of consent. Like that's
crazy that they have to be explicit with that.
Yeah, and so that was banned up. But then there was multiple weeks where it was very much like, well, clearly it's the woman giving birth, and therefore clearly she will do all the household chores normally. And so the advice was like, your partner may not want to do as much cooking, so maybe one night a week you could order in a takeaway for both of you.
Oh my gosh.
And I was just like, I actually do most of the cooking, so I could just cook. Like that is like within the modern world. It's not crazy to think the not wife in the relationship might be cooking, right? And then the one that really got me was your partner may not be up to doing as much washing and particularly ironing, so maybe buy more shirts so there's less pressure on her.
What? Is that meant to be some sort of supportive standard for someone who has literally birthed a human being? Like, what?
Okay, she went through that for 9 months, pushed out a child, but it's okay. She gets takeaway once a week now.
Yeah, and she doesn't have to do as much washing and ironing.
I mean, there'll be more because there'll be more shirts,
And she'll no longer need to be pestered about sex.
What I love about that is, as you say, like the washing and ironing, there's still the same amount of it. You're just doing it less regularly and therefore creating more of a load to do when you do get around to it. Like there is no real solution. At least the takeaway does at least make you have to cook one less meal. Like the buying a new shirt is just unbelievable. Like.
And with the cost of living as well, I mean, really, you're not going to be going out of your way to buy new shirts when babies already cost an extortionate amount of money to raise with everything.
Actually, I hear babies really cheap, and I won't hear anything more about this.
I did sort of half expect some of the advice to be kind of maybe employ the maid for a few more hours a week,
Yeah, genuinely, it is not far off that stuff. And do you know what though? It has been like on a slightly more serious note. it's been genuinely a struggle we have had to find kind of pregnancy advice that assumes that there is a competent partner involved. Like pretty much universally, and some of it's like dated and whatever, and obviously some of it's necessary, but it is absolutely mad like how hard it was to find pregnancy advice that is like more than, yeah, it's probably best if you go to the birth, right?
Well, it reminds me like the level of, essentially it's the patriarchy.
Should we just get Sarah on the mic?
Yeah,
go on, Sarah. You can be a. This is officially the spouse episode of the podcast. Like,
I just wanted to hear what you were saying.
just the insane pregnancy advice that from yeah, and how it has been genuinely hard to find like advice that assumes a level of competency from the partner.
Yeah, very, and I think I came away with the conclusion that I'm the dad, which was really disturbing because all the advice was like for the dads, like maybe if you don't feel like cooking, maybe get the takeaway. And I'm like, I don't cook. And it's like if you want to do the laundry, and I was like, I don't do the laundry. Like when Ben goes away, he's resorted to giving me ready meals. So I think I came away with like, this advice is shitty, but I think it's for me. I think I'm the dad in this situation.
I love how like Sarah is literally at the same level in this stuff as my granddad.
We probably have a very similar taste in toffee.
How do you feel about Werther's Originals?
I actually do love a Werther's Original, so
yeah, me too. Yeah, 100%. Yeah,
top tier. I'm going to stop messing up your podcast record now.
Yeah. Back to bed.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah.
Did you make the bed, Ben? Because I feel like you should have been given that advice.
Huh?
Yes, it's all right. Just checking I've made the bed. Like, you shut the doors.
Yeah.
I do actually also do all the bed wash, the wash of the laundry of the bed as well. So that is
that was brilliant.
But yeah, genuinely, like we have not been able to find very much. Like here is how you can actually be useful as like the partner of a pregnant person, and it's almost a little bit worrying, to be honest, that this seems to be the advice that people want and need.
And it reminds me of a friend of mine, her husband had prostate cancer, and prostate cancer is one of the highest success rates of being cured, basically. But she was telling me the way that the men get treated is unlike any other cancer that you get. They get to spend like an hour and a half with a consultant talking with them of how they're meant to do things, what things will look like, them being really informed. They get given information, they proper sat down and basically sort of gentle parented for their cancer. And it just reminds me of that. It's just like the privilege and entitlement is ridiculous.
To be fair, though, I do think if you've got cancer, like, okay, maybe it's ridiculous that they're only doing that for one kind of cancer or cancer patient.
Thing. Yeah.
But they probably should do that for all cancer patients.
Yes. Agreed.
I mean, I don't know what it is that you hate about cancer patients, Jonny, but
they're just always moaning and complaining and just want special treatment. It's like pregnant people, just like
So that's pregnant women, actually,
oh,
Jonny?
Sorry, yeah.
Generally, I had this the other day, you're talking about like that kind of sense of entitlement, and I kind of got caught doing this the other day with medical stuff where I had my GP does like a yearly checkup where they just kind of go like height, weight, do some bloods, like check you're okay, all the rest of it. And it was on my day off work. It was first thing in the morning. And so I literally just threw on like a pair of tracky shorts and like yesterday's T-shirt. I think I had like some socks and sliders on. And it was like a 5-minute walk down the road. So I just wandered down the road. And I was going to leave the house. And Sarah looked at me and was like, are you going to go to the doctors dressed like that? And I was like, yeah, why? And she was like, oh my God, because they'll just take you seriously anyway because you're a man. And I was like, yeah, right, sure, I'm with you now. Like, actually, like, I don't even think about the fact that I can just do that and I would still get taken seriously.
I mean,
like,
I have to say, as someone who has throughout the course of my life had to deal with doctors and medical stuff a lot, obviously I don't experience it in the same way a woman does, right? But there have been a lot of times where I have not been taken seriously, right? Even when I've been
sure,
yeah. So I don't know. I don't know how far I go along with that.
Well, I think there's other things playing in there because obviously being autistic anyway, but also having potentially the sort of health problems that are not immediately obvious for you, that's probably playing into it, I would imagine. Discrimination functions very similarly, even if it's a different type of discrimination.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the person here that really can talk about from both perspectives because of going to the doctors pre-transition and then post. And I get taken a lot more seriously now. I think because of, and obviously we're going to talk about it later, everything that's going on with the media that's so kind of anti-trans now, a lot of doctors very much and nurses go, oh, we're going to really support you and almost kind of go a little over and above, which can be really nice, but also there's a sense of, well, I also present as male now, whereas before it was, oh, you're just a bit anxious, oh, how are your hormones? When was your last cycle? And it's definitely a lot easier now going to the GP.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because so much of, when a woman goes to a GP, so much of that is put down to, hormones or emotion, like being emotional and that kind of thing. But like men are like way more emotional than women. Right? Yes. They just like show it in different ways.
Yeah. And there's also typically men are not socialized to contain and regulate themselves. Someone has to do it for them. I think it's sometimes called emotional labor if you're the one doing the work of doing it, but it's also emotional hermeneutics. So there's those two things that a lot of people, typically women, have to do for men in order for themselves to be safe, essentially.
Okay, so I have a bit of a thing about the emotional labour term, which I think that's a really important phenomenon that you described. But emotional labour was a term that was originally used to describe like people that are doing customer service roles and the emotional labour they had to perform. And I find it interesting and a little worrying the way that that's kind of bluntly moved so it can be applied to women of any class rather than very specifically working class jobs. I feel like there's some kind of, and like, I think it's difficult to talk about because at the same time, that phenomenon of the outsourcing of emotional work to female partners of men is a really important thing that needs to be talked about. But I am a little frustrated that is now what we use emotional labor to describe when it was describing a very specific kind of experience of working class people. Which is not to say it's not important to discuss that thing, but that kind of linguistic slippage I find interesting and a little frustrating at times.
Well, that is just the kind of thing you as a man would find interesting, isn't it, Ben? You misogynistic bastard.
I knew you were going to say that. I was so careful trying to not come across as a horrible misogynist, but I knew I had no choice. On that note, then, should we just move on? I think the ending note of Ben's a horrible misogynist is probably about right. Like, I do actually need that advice that that I was being given.
Thank goodness you were given it, because Sarah would have had a hell of a time.
Yeah. So we shall move on to our main topic of the day, which is to talk a little bit about, in particular, this report that Amnesty International have put out, which we will link in the show notes. I will make sure that I send that across. So we will link that in the show notes, but it is, really, really interesting. Before we delve into that, though, I thought it would be quite interesting, and I haven't prepped either of you about this, so I'm just going to throw it on you. I'd be really interested in both Jonny and Seb, your kind of experience, I guess, as trans people, about what your experience of being trans has been like, and whether you have felt a kind of change in recent years in your experience of being that? Because it feels to me, very much from an outside perspective, like that hostility has increased. But I'm interested to hear whether you have kind of felt that on a kind of personal level. And sorry for not warning, I was going to ask that.
I mean, I remember, I do struggle with claiming trans as a sort of identifier, because being non-binary I know is kind of trans, but it doesn't have nearly the same. I can pass really easily as a man. So it's, and most of the time I do use that privilege, particularly in church spaces, particularly in the appointment that I am in, soon to not be. But I also think, when I was teaching and doing my PGCE, I did one of the various assignments things, one of them you have to do on policy, and I did about trans, intersex and non-binary people, or gender non-conforming people, and basing it on the City Guild's in law policy on that subject, which I came across. And there was a much more openness, and this was probably nearly 10 years ago. There was much more openness to the topic, basically. People were wanting to be affirming, essentially, for those who are trans, intersex and gender non-conforming. And that's really, there is a huge shift now, societally, and certainly in what people think in the discourse. And there's a lot of it where people don't really know anything because they're not exposed to it. So they just hear what it says on the media and they just parrot it. It's like many topics. So yeah, that's been my experience.
Yeah, from my personal experience, whether the world feels a lot heavier now. Things that I used to take for granted, I no longer take for granted. So, even a couple of years ago, I wouldn't think anything of going into a man's toilet. I'm on hormones, I've had surgery, I pass pretty well, generally speaking. But in the last year or so, I find myself gravitating more towards using if there isn't a gender neutral one, a disabled bathroom instead, or an accessible loo. And yeah, I think it's really tricky, especially with the bathroom bans has been a hard thing for me, because legally speaking, I shouldn't be going into the men's bathroom, but I also shouldn't go into the women's one if that's going to cause emotional distress to people. And all I want to do is wee, let me go in, let me do my business, let me wash my hands and go. But that's now more of a concern for when I'm going out in public. That's something I just naturally need to clock now, which I didn't have to before. And the same with, different spaces. I've also felt, thankfully, not the majority of people I know, but kind of people adjacent to who I know who are kind of typically gay men and lesbians, I found, not so much bisexuals, that are kind of starting to parrot some of this rhetoric against trans people, which is really concerning.
Yeah.
I think, they're almost with the attitude of, if we align ourselves with power, we're going to be protected. And history has shown that does not happen.
That always works, doesn't it?
It's really disappointing. You see that, trans women were at the front of the Stonewall riots, and, we wouldn't have the protection we have today without trans people, specifically trans women of color. It's really disappointing, angering, scary, and all of the above else, kind of what's going on with my community and, others.
And I think with the toilets thing, because obviously last year there was the ruling about essentially the Equality Act of gender reassignment and sex, and those being protected characteristics, and being trans male or trans female doesn't come under sex. It comes under being trans, or gender reassignment is the technical term. And that's all that ruling was about. But the EHRC went on the bandwagon of the kind of momentum of that ruling and decided to give that preliminary guidance out, which was a complete hot mess, and have also recently put out new guidance, which is also a hot mess, and using phrases like, you need to use your common sense, whatever the fuck that means. And they're the ones who have changed the stuff about toilets, not the courts. Which is, and it's just this whole conflation of stuff. It's almost like the court ruling generated enough energy for basically people who are anti-trans to go, right, we can start putting things in motion and make things even harder for them. There's tremendous amounts of conflation and mis and disinformation about what's going on, and it is scary. And it's angering.
It's worth mentioning the shift that's happened in the EHRC in particular, because the EHRC has undergone a process of essentially a form of radicalization where people who sit on the EHRC have been replaced by more kind of right-wing and transphobic people. So that's a big part of the reason we're seeing legislation being brought out by the EHRC that is overtly transphobic, and also partly why we're seeing vexatious investigations into political parties and organisations that probably shouldn't be investigated in such ways.
And I think we've got this, crazy thing where actually we're talking about the issue of trans rights and recognition, all the rest of it, and yet we're spending a bunch of time talking about pissing, because that ends up being what everyone gets very excited about, and it's so stupid on one level, but I think there's such a big thing about it's a very cleverly picked topic, right? Because actually. If you have a dog, dogs will often look directly at you. They make direct eye contact with you when they take a shit, a lot of dogs. And it's really disconcerting. But the reason they do it is because they feel vulnerable and they want to make sure you're there to protect them. And actually humans feel the same. Like when we go to the loo, it's a vulnerable thing.
Ben,
right?
I don't know what kink this is that you're sharing with us, but I'm not sure I want to hear anymore.
Don't yuck his yum, Adam.
Look, I'm not here to kink shame, right? But I just don't want to.
This is a PG podcast.
I think whatever you do in your own house is between you and God. I don't want to see it in the streets. That's all I'm saying.
And the dog, apparently. But no, it's a vulnerable thing, isn't it? But at the same time, I think there's an irony here where technically, like you were saying, Seb, it's now technically kind of potentially against the law for you to use the men's loo. And yet, if you went into the ladies' loo and people saw that, they would be really worried and concerned, because they would think, why is that person who is a man going in there, right? And so you kind of end up in this ridiculous position where, as you say, you just want to go to the loo, and it suddenly becomes this whole palaver.
It is, and it's really frustrating because, and quite rightly, if I went into the female toilets, someone is likely to end up calling the police, and I have no business being in there. But I think what a lot of people are also forgetting during this argument, they're saying, oh, this is to protect women, and women need women-only spaces. But you've got lots of people who are kind of cis-het women who are going into toilets that just present slightly more masculine, and they're being attacked because of it.
Yeah.
Which, I think that kind of breaches onto their misogyny of saying, well, we're kind of saying what makes a woman at this point. And, you've got someone who, in this case, cis-het woman, identifies that going in and can't go to the toilet without having their lives in danger. It's not protecting women at all.
I think it's worth mentioning as well how this idea of using your common sense, as they say, it is effectively a right-wing dog whistle, right?
Yes.
The right wing use that all the time. It's just common sense all the time. And this is now the guidance that's being issued by a government or a kind of government adjacent kind of body. It is ridiculous. And it just sort of, again, to kind of, go back to this a little bit, points to that change in the EHRC where there have essentially been political appointments made, right? This stuff is systemic, and this is what you get when right-wingers are in charge. And I do include the Labour government in that.
And I think, you're so right to talk about the role misogyny plays here, right? Because, actually it's all focused around policing the boundaries of womanhood, right? Whether we're talking about trans women, we are talking about, like blokes in dresses trying to assault our girls, R spelled A-R-E, of course. Like, it is, that is the rhetoric. And when it comes to trans men, the rhetoric a lot of the time is like, our young women are chopping their tits off. That's the, I know that's a crude way, but that is genuinely the rhetoric.
That is what they say.
Like, so it's all about, policing the boundaries of womanhood ultimately. So I think, talking about misogyny is dead on the money with this stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a way of controlling women.
So having kind of set out a little bit of that groundwork, and hopefully assured anyone listening to this even mildly worried that we were going to be at all transphobic, I think we're hopefully won everyone over on that. Adam, you look so shocked to the idea that someone would, maybe they've just flicked on this episode and gone, oh, some Christians talking about trans stuff. That's worrying.
I mean, it depends who that person is, because are they coming here for the discussion on for the politics or the Christianity?
Yes, exactly. But shall we delve a little bit into this Amnesty report? So it's called Like a Snowball, the Growth and Impact of the Gender Critical Movement in the UK. And it's, as I said, very, very good kind of investigation, I guess is the term, into what we've been seeing. So I don't know, Jonny, if you're the best person to maybe introduce this and talk us a little bit about what it says.
Sure. I think it's a really good and helpful report to kind of outline what's been going on the past, really 10 years in the UK about trans rights. And it's probably quite a useful resource for people who don't know much about it, actually, because it's quite straightforward, it's easy to understand and all that, and it explains a lot of things. It kind of starts with a bit of background, talking about, generally speaking, in the UK, there has been a tremendous push of different organisations of various sorts, from sort of businesses being created to charities and so on, that are basically anti-rights, so anti-human rights. And Amnesty International estimates that between 2019 to 2023, about £106 million was spent on anti-rights activities in the UK alone. And a lot of that is being pushed by some American organizations, such as Alliance Defending Freedom, which is such a US name. And it also talks about how gender criticism and things like that being gender critical is becoming an increasing movement, and how it started up in about 2017 sort of time. I'll just read out the on page 3 and on page 23. So the key findings and the conclusion are probably, if you don't want to read the whole thing, probably quite useful to read those two bits, and it's quite straightforward. But I'll read the key findings now. So I think it sets the scene for what the report talks about and summarizes the report pretty well. So the first one is, between January 2020 and April 2025, media coverage of issues about trans people has been excessively high compared to the size of the trans population, their role in society, and public interest in these topics. It continues to say that across the 4 outlets, and the 4 outlets that they look at are The Guardian, The Sun, The Telegraph, and The Times. Of those 4 outlets, a total of 17,000 articles were published between January 2020 and April 2025. So that's 264 articles a month, or 9 per day, about trans people. Like, that's not just...
Across 4 newspapers. That's over 2 a day per newspaper.
Can we just say that we're
Insane.
more popular than Taylor Swift's wedding right now?
It says that most media reports about trans people have a negative sentiment, while trans people are hardly seen in stories. When they do appear, it's as criminals or murder victims. And actually, in the report, it talks about the fact that throughout those years, only 2 trans people were ever mentioned in all of those 17,000 articles. One was a murder victim, she was 16, and one, she committed some violent sexual crimes and was imprisoned. For each year analysed, the UK Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, and the Scottish First Minister appear consistently, so Keir Starmer, Rishi Sunak, and Boris Johnson, suggesting, in terms of the UK Prime Minister, suggesting that issues of sex and gender have been elevated to top political priorities. And since 2017, a diverse and coordinated gender-critical movement has appeared in the UK. Of the 51 organisations Amnesty International UK have mapped, only 3 were established before 2017. So since 2017, 48 organisations have popped up, basically. Except for 3 registered charities, Sex Matters, Philia, LGB Alliance, well over half of the groups mapped were informal, followed by registered companies, 17 apparently of which are now dissolved. An analysis of available accounts from Philia, Sex Matters, and LGB Alliance for the financial years of 2019 to 2024 shows a combined expenditure of £3.6 million. So over 5 years, those 3 charities had an expenditure of £3.6 million, and most of that went onto legal challenge fees. They were challenging various things, and whether that be someone's behaviour at work and trying to support and prop up their anti-trans rhetoric, or challenging the law. So that's the kind of the overview of the report, basically. There's a lot of other detail in there that's quite useful, and talks about the history and documenting how gender critical thought has been supported as a political belief, how it's become more prevalent, who's doing these sorts of things, and also noting that trans voices are decidedly missing from nearly all of the articles. They are very, very rarely mentioned as actual people, individual people, or their thoughts on the matter. With people like Joanna Rowling mentioned, many, many times, Keir Starmer mentioned many, many times. Yeah, it's a really helpful report that someone like Amnesty have been able to do that, I think, and really clearly evidence what has been going on and calling it out.
I think the evidence element is really important, right? Because I don't read that report and find anything I find shocking, but prior to this point, there hasn't necessarily been that really high level of kind of laid out evidence of stuff that, actually we've talked about on this very podcast in terms of the anti-trans movement and its links and the organised nature of it and the way the media has bought into that. You can see it, you can feel it, but actually having that very specific evidence and that analysis in the media and that mapping of these organisations is really helpful to say, look, we weren't just talking out our arse. Actually, this is a thing that's really happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, I don't know about you, quite affirming to have that evidence for the experience of a lot of trans people. Just go, yes, the way we're feeling is appropriate.
Yeah, I would agree. I think a lot of the time it kind of comes across as gaslighting, of going, oh, why are you making it all about you? Why are you throwing it down our throats? And going, actually, look, 17,000 articles were published and that wasn't even from us anyway. You're the ones that are talking about it, and you're the ones making this a really big deal, considering we represent like 0.5% of the population.
There are more autistic people in the UK than there are trans people. So it's about 1% autistic people and 0.5% trans. There's also quite a big Venn diagram.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's definitely an overlap there.
Check a lot of boxes.
One of the other things the report does that I thought was really interesting and important, I think it kind of does this more as a thread throughout it rather than I don't think there was a specific part that spoke about this. But it did sort of have as a thread throughout it the idea that A, these organizations are not, and B, perhaps they should be challenging the very term gender critical, right? Because it's a new term that's been adopted by these what are transphobes, right? This kind of alliance, I guess, of transphobes. Because I think this is the other thing, is that it's not that there are just one group of people who are pushing this stuff. It's that there are a few different groups. Most notably, you've got the sort of right-wing Christian groups like Alliance Defending Freedom, and then you've got these TERF groups and individuals doing it as well. And you've got some groups like the LGB Alliance as well doing this. So it's an interesting and concerning kind of alliance of different ideologies who will put aside their fairly fundamental differences on some things and work together specifically to attack trans people. And so they've adopted this phrase and with it this framing of being gender critical. And then also as a sort of counterweight to that as well, tried to make out that the term TERF, trans exclusionary radical feminist, is a slur, which is it's not. It's just literally a description.
Sorry, can we put a trigger warning on this episode for that sort of horrible language? But I think that's that's a really classic example of what we see is using this kind of progressive seeming language. Well, actually, that's a slur, all the rest of it, and try to make it sound like these are people that are protecting women and actually doing feminist work. Actually, there is a real effort to make this stuff seem like progressive thought rather than, actually Judith Butler's done some really good work on very specifically drawing links between the anti-trans movement and kind of fascist ideology, right? This is undeniably a movement, not just of the right, but of the far right, really.
Yeah, indeed. But she also draws a really strong link with the church generating it. And, it starts in the Catholic Church with their gender ideology stuff. And particularly in Latin America, and then is picked up by the evangelical side, and then that kind of transfers into the US, and then the US it really picks up some traction, and that's where we get all the others like the Heritage Foundation and others, which are essentially using these things to create power for themselves. To put themselves into powerful positions, and sadly it's Christianity has a lot to answer for this particular side of things. Well, yet again, Christianity has a thing to answer for.
Yeah, I think you're right, but I also think we can be more specific as well, can't we? It's not just Christianity, it's certain forms of Christianity. The organization that I've been sort of paying quite a lot of attention to recently, and a lot of the kind of stuff that they're putting out, is the Evangelical Alliance. The Evangelical Alliance talk about this stuff all the time. And I know they talk about this stuff all the time because I follow their social media and I listen to their horrible podcast, right? And they're always banging on.
You need to look after yourself better, man. You've got to make better choices for your life.
This is, I know it's crazy, but this is genuinely something that I think I kind of enjoy listening and to these awful humans and seeing what they. It's probably not quite fair to put it that way, but some of them are genuinely awful.
I genuinely think we could probably do like a weekly podcast that is just us responding to the weekly Evangelical Alliance podcast.
Do you know how often I have had to refrain from sending the episode in the podcast chat and saying, we need to do a response episode to this, literally every week?
Yeah, but we drive ourselves completely insane doing it. Like, that's the main reason we shouldn't do it. Like...
No. I mean, I love it, right? But maybe it should be a Patreon-only thing.
Yeah, 20 minutes a week of Adam talking about the latest Evangelical Alliance podcast episode.
Patreon.com/bread and rosaries.
I do get, Adam, that there needs to be more nuance, and it's not the whole church, but that's also like saying not all men. And I think
there
also
there it is.
The worm has turned.
I bet you've got pronouns in your bio as well, haven't you?
Yeah.
Now who's getting accused of being misogynist? Tables turned.
No, I do get what you mean, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't use Christianity as a general thing, but I also think it's important to identify specific groups too.
Yes,
because if we can't do that, then we don't really know the enemy we're fighting.
100%. Yes, I think my perspective was more. We're part, they're still part of the body of Christ. We're part of the body of Christ, so it's still us. I think they are, even if it's uncomfortable.
I was talking about you, Jonny.
Oh, that's fair. Yeah, that's fair. I'm not a real minister anyway, am I? And it's not real communion. It's not real ordination.
Your words, not mine.
Hi, I'm Jonty.
I'm Laura.
And I'm Malky.
And we put together a magazine called Shibboleth. If you're watching this on video, then we're holding up some of our favorite copies now. If you're listening to it on audio, imagine the best magazine you've ever seen. We are a Christian leftist magazine. If your politics are leftist, if your politics are liberatory, if your faith is deconstructed or progressive, I think you would like Shibboleth magazine, and you can check us out at shibbolethmag.com. And we are sponsoring, with no money, this episode of Bread and Rosaries.
Shibbolethmag.com.
Reconstructing.
Resisting.
Renewing our minds.
Something I did find really interesting, there's this section that is just entitled Parallels Between Gender Critical and Ultra-Conservative Christian Actors. And there's a really interesting, they say, while their starting points are different, we consider the demands of gender-critical actors to be the same as those of ultra-conservative Christian groups. And even, I didn't know that specifically talks about a direct situation where the Alliance Defending Freedom International and a gender-critical kind of sports pressure group actively work together on a project. So it's not just indirect, they're actually directly working together, and they are working towards the same aims, right? And it's really interesting, what Amnesty makes very clear is that the kind of starting point is different, right? And actually, it is in some ways, but I think in the sense that they think, gender critical people think it comes from their understanding of how to protect vulnerable people, whereas the ultra-conservative Christian ones are coming from that perspective of like a theological perspective. Like we've already talked about, I do actually think ultimately they're both groups fundamentally interested in policing the boundaries of womanhood. And I think it's really very revealing that they are willing to take money and work with, organizations that are far-right Christian groups, really. I think Amnesty is avoiding saying far-right, but, ultra-conservative, far-right, what's the difference? Like, that they're willing to work together, I think, is probably very, very revealing.
I mean, you've got to admit, the way the media, the government, everyone's kind of going about this is an incredibly clever way of doing it, like building so much traction. Like, I genuinely refuse to believe that everyone who holds these views are just horrible people. I think they are misinformed, ignorant, misguided, and a lot of them think that what they're doing is for the best for others. And it kind of puts them in this really tricky position as well, because, you know, for me, I'm holding on to the fact that what they're doing is not okay, and it's really hurtful to others and, you know, putting others' lives at risk. But at the same time, they're being fed this stream of lies, thinking that, you know, oh, if we attack this small minority group, if we can eradicate them, we're going to be safe. We're going to, you know, make the world better again. And it's a great way for lawmakers, policymakers, those with power to go, don't focus on the cost of living crisis. Don't focus on the fact that the world is on fire. It's entirely fucked right now. Instead, what are these small wins we can have? You know, and they do it against other groups as well. I mean, you know, it's really easy to go on social media or something, and you just see all these posts about asylum seekers staying in hotels and then protests everywhere. And again, it's just choosing a really small, vulnerable group and saying, look, they're weak, go against them and you might win. And it makes people feel powerful, like they can make a difference. And it's hard to hold those two together.
And I think, you know, it's a really good example of that asylum seeking stuff, in that once again, there's this idea of protecting women there, right? That the foreign man is inherently a threat to the indigenous woman, right? And that is, you know, the uniting idea of these kind of disparate movements of kind of anti-asylum seeker, anti-trans and far-right Christian groups, is that actually a lot of it does come back down to this kind of fake idea of protecting women. But I think you're so right that it comes from people that are protecting or trying to protect themselves. I think there's something very revealing about, you know, actually we started a bit with Keir Starmer, where actually he would start talking about trans stuff when he felt like he was kind of losing control a little bit. And I don't think Keir Starmer is a like doctrinaire transphobe. I think he thinks, like he does with a lot of stuff, that it is a way of like essentially trying to fight the far right on their own turf. I mean, like, actually I'll prove to you that I can be stronger on this than you think. And it feels like you know, a desperate man grabbing something he thinks will be a life raft, and it turns out that actually both the issues you mentioned, like anti-trans and anti-asylum seeker rhetoric, he thinks, and clearly it wasn't, but he thinks is his life raft to popularity again.
Yeah, I mean, Keir Starmer is, I mean, in many ways he is the typical liberal, isn't he? He's basically not doctrinaire on anything except maintaining his own power, which, you know, obviously has led to his downfall recently. I think this really does kind of show us how liberals work, though, doesn't it? It's sort of laid bare whenever there's a kind of moment of difficulty, of extremes and so on. I don't want to say extremes because people think I'm talking about the left, but you know, when there's a particular moment rearing its head, what do liberals do? Well, they will fight fascism up to a point, although fight is a pretty strong way of putting it. But ultimately, they're always going to cave to the right. They won't cave to the left. They'll always cave to the right. And Keir Starmer is the absolute classic example of that.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
It's even more depressing as well, the fact that it's a Labour government. You know, you think of the long-standing history of LGBT people and the Labour Party. But yeah, that's just, I mean, it's scary, it's disappointing, it's, you know, lots of things for any government to be doing these things. But I think, you know, if we had the Tories back in and these came, you know, these policies and laws came into effect, I don't think I would have been as disappointed. Frustrated, angry, scared, absolutely, but disappointment comes to mind when I think of the Labour government that have done this.
But I think as well, there's maybe an element of, as we've kind of discussed, like there is this bit of splintering going on in the kind of broader queer community, right? And I think, you know, actually, I think we can overplay that a little bit in terms of the majority of queer people, in the same way the majority of women are supportive of trans rights. But whilst there is definitely a history of kind of LGBTQ advocacy in the Labour Party, it has been because queer people have dragged the Labour Party kicking and screaming at times towards that. And I wonder how much of it is actually that kind of partial splintering of the queer community and the kind of normalization of queer life, which is obviously generally a good thing, but actually you then end up with people who are more interested in defending the status quo than they are liberation for everyone. Actually, whether there isn't quite the same power to drag the Labour Party or whoever else kicking and screaming towards the right side of this issue as there has been in the past.
It's a bit like how people talk about the Methodist movement and saying, you know, in the romanticized good old days of a time when things were a bit more radical, but then we got too comfortable. And then things became, as they are now, essentially quite dwindling. And I think there's a perhaps something similar there. But I also think, you know, a really important thing to know is that the right are very clever and know that by splitting people, by causing division, by, you know, it's divide and conquer, basically. If you have a society that is fractious, they are much easier to control, essentially. And I think this is a part, you know, one of the pieces of doing that. It's, you know, they're the problem, they're the problem, they're the problem. And if you manage to split communities up, then they're easier to control. Really, you know, migrants a lot of the time would be part of working class communities. But they're the other. They're dangerous. You need to get rid of them.
Immigrants. I knew it was them. Even when it was the Bears, I knew it was them.
I've been waiting to use that one for so long.
Oh, I like that.
But we don't live in a society where we're encouraged to come together as a community anymore, though. No. You look at government cuts and spending, and where is there really to meet other people and to get to know those outside of your immediate group? You know, I think of when Jonny and I first came to Norfolk, and just the attitudes towards going, oh, we've got a gay minister, what's that going to be? But very quickly dissolved. As soon as they met us, it was like, that was the least interesting thing about us. You know, I think we got a couple of comments of who does the cleaning, which of course we said, well, we're both men, we have to employ a cleaner. Like, we don't know how to do that. But, you know, realistically speaking, it just became so not important. And I think that's a big part of coming together as a community. You experience things that you just wouldn't get to experience otherwise if you were on your own. Yeah. And instead, we're all working more hours for less money, and then going on social media, looking at everyone's amazing lives, and then seeing all of these carefully curated kind of media posts trying to get us opposed to other groups of people. And as Jonny said, it's very much divide and conquer. It's not about unity.
But I think even our theology as well, there's a real push for like doing things like reclaiming Imago Dei, you know, being made in the image of God, because obviously traditionally it's been used in quite a misogynistic, white supremacist, cishet way for many, many years, and people are trying to reclaim it, which I completely understand. But the trouble with it is it's very individualistic if it's isolated. And I think my feeling, I've been thinking about this recently, the ideas of the communitarian model of the Trinity, the social model of the Trinity, and the body of Christ, they are probably the two most helpful theologies for combating a lot of the bullshit that's happening, essentially.
So tell us, when you talk about those theologies, give us a very brief overview. What are those theologies? I know we've touched on them before. Cool, thank you for that. That's a nice and easy description.
Basically, yeah.
But yeah, tell us about those. Yeah.
Well, I mean, like with Boff, for example, he talks about the Trinity being inherently social within, so there's a sociality within God's self, essentially, and God is social. There is a relational happening already going on there, and we need to kind of, and there's the sort of outpouring of that into humanity, and we need to basically model that sociality, being in a loving relationship with each other. And a way we understand that is obviously through Christ, but also through the way God works in the world, essentially, and our understanding. Boff effectively says, we need to understand the theology of God through our experience in many ways, rather than coming from a abstract Neoplatonic post-Aristotelian way. And I also really like there's a...
You rattle off a lot of fancy words, don't you?
I still don't know all of the things on your soundboard, Adam.
Much like how we don't know all of the words you use.
Much like the mystery of God.
Wow.
I'm comparing your soundboard to God. I'm comparing your soundboard to God, Adam.
I thought you were comparing yourself to God.
No, definitely not. But yeah, and Lynn-Marie Tomstad is a queer theologian who I really like, and she's far smarter than I am, but she has this really good analogy towards the end of her book on the Trinity. And she uses the analogy, and she approaches it from the idea, sort of a bit like Moltmann, of Christ taking humanity into God's self. So that idea of through Jesus Christ, humanity is then able to be a part of God's self in the Trinity. There's sort of room made for it. And she has this idea of essentially looking at communion and a feast, essentially, of this massive table where everyone's invited and has space to it. And there's always a potential to make more room at the table kind of thing, and everyone's invited to take part in this feast kind of thing with God in there as well. And it's this really lovely image, I think, of how we are to relate to each other and relate to God, and how we're meant to be, basically, of basically this massive feast. And I really like that idea. And if we were to use that model to start to organize ourselves, to learn how we can abide with each other, put up with each other when we do really disagree with each other as well, then I think when it comes to supporting each other and combating the far right, I think that can be a good starting point, certainly from a conceptual standpoint, but also from an organising, practical standpoint as well.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's really interesting what you're saying about, I think we often, and myself included, think about reclaiming Imago Dei as this really idea of, you're made in the image of God. And, actually there is something powerful in that, as saying, every person, regardless of gender identity, is made in the image of God. But I think you're so right that there is a deeply individualistic element of that. And it's almost like you're kind of trying to create a kind of communal Imago Dei.
Yeah.
It's not that we as individuals are created in the image of God. It's that God is a community of love, and we are meant to reflect that in the kind of, I guess, in most broad sense, human community.
But I also think, if we're to get theological a bit more, if we're talking about Imago Dei in this context, and we're talking about this kind of process of deification that Jonny kind of spoke about, where it's about the sort of participation of the human in the divine, right? I don't think that works if you don't also talk about kenosis, right? This idea that there's this self-emptying that happens, particularly with Christ on the cross, but also something about what we're called to be as humans, right? This is a deeply relational and giving thing. And all of these concepts, I think, have to go alongside each other, have to work together. And I think that's something that we just don't see with these conservative Christian groups, because let's face it, they just don't think particularly theologically deeply, do they?
No. And I really agree with you about the kenosis thing. That's really, really important of how we relate. The actual doing of the things is, that outpouring of love and self-giving.
And I think as well, if we're talking theologically, and it's kind of a simpler idea in some ways, not going as complicated as you guys, but actually, I do think it's really important to reaffirm this idea that like God is trans, and that sounds like a wacky out there, like, or pushing the boundaries or whatever, but that is just a basic orthodox position of the historical Christian church, like, because God the Father is beyond gender, God the Son is a man, and God the Holy Spirit, if we're associating that with the spirit of wisdom, Sophia, as is done in the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church, uses female pronouns. So actually, it is a basic tenet of Christian faith that God is trans, as we understand it now.
Sorry, I was going to play those air horns when you first said it, but I very nearly clicked the wrong button because the button next to that is the heresy button.
Yeah.
So I just avoided it and played it later instead.
Yeah. Good plan. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I wonder if it sounds almost a bit like basic or like trying to do something super provocative, but I kind of do want to emphasize this is like basic historical Orthodox theology, right? Like that has always been the view of the church, that there are multiple gender identities within the Godhead.
There's a really fun Elizabeth Schussler Fiorenza, not the other one she's married to. She talks about Jesus being intersex because, if we believe in not the Immaculate Conception, that's about Mary. If we believe in the virgin birth, then the idea of Jesus having all the chromosomes of Mary, which would be purely female, but Jesus presented male. So Jesus is intersex. I really like that idea, though I'm going to say some heresy, Adam. So be prepared.
I'm ready.
I don't necessarily believe in the virgin birth.
Heresy! Remove this filth!
That is a genuine heresy. That's really great. Like,
it is, but it's a pretty common one these days, to be fair.
Yeah. But I do worry sometimes we toe a little. I wish we were a little bit less orthodox sometimes our theology. So very exciting to get a straight down the line heresy.
No, you're off. You're kicked off the podcast, Jonny. I'm afraid.
It's really interesting when you're talking about, made in the image of God, and how that's actually used quite a lot of the time as an argument against trans people, though, of going. You're made in God's image, but then you're choosing to inject yourself with all these hormones and cutting bits off or, adding bits on, but completely ignoring that, you have a lot of cis people that would go, okay, well, a hair transplant is gender affirming care. Pumping yourself with steroids to get ripped at the gym, is still kind of against that quote unquote image of God if we're going down that line, or anything else. But that, I hear, is used quite a lot as an argument against trans people.
And that strongly derives from the Catholic gender ideology stuff.
And I think as well, even like GLP-1s, right? You could absolutely make the same argument that these kind of Ozempic and that sort of stuff, and I'm not necessarily anti them, but like you are very specifically choosing to mold your body in a quote unquote unnatural way to achieve some sort of understanding of what your body should look like properly. That is absolutely as much a rejection of the Imago Dei as all the other stuff you've talked about, right? But I haven't heard, maybe I've missed that, I haven't heard a single person kind of come out against Ozempic as a rejection of the Imago Dei, right? It's so obviously an inconsistent argument.
Or tattoos, or dyeing your hair.
I have heard people argue against tattoos, though, still. Like, that's crazy, but yes.
It is just, again, fundamentally a theological illiteracy, isn't it? It's misunderstanding the theology around, the image of God and imagining that refers literally to your physical body. And I'm someone who, has quite a materialistic understanding of Christianity, but come on, guys, like, for real?
Genuinely thought you were about I'm someone who has quite like a godlike body, but still, like...
I mean, have you seen it?
You can't air horn yourself, man. That's not okay. Like,
I don't know. We all need a bit of that confidence.
What is the charge? Eating a meal? A succulent Chinese meal?
I know that clip is ridiculous. Oh, I'm just broken now.
Giving Adam control of a soundboard one of the worst decisions I've ever made.
Not having it back now.
One of the things I did want to touch on that's in the report as well, I think is really very important, is this idea of bodily autonomy that the report kind of draws basically this connection between anti-trans, anti-abortion, and anti-Gillick competence. And this made me very happy. No, not very happy. I thought very vindicated. Not happy, because it's very sad. But because I have been banging on about this, either intentionally or otherwise, it's absolutely going to undermine Gillick competency for ages. So people who don't know, Gillick competency is a court case quite a while ago now. A woman named Victoria Gillick, who must be absolutely fuming that her name has been used for this, basically took her GP surgery to court for offering contraception to her daughter, who was under the age of 16. And the court ultimately affirmed that if they have the legal capacity to do so, under 16s are able to make their own decisions about healthcare. Okay, and for as someone who has been a youth worker, who has done sexual health work, who has done kind of distribution of condoms to under 16s, this was our guiding light doing that stuff, right? This was our legal protection for why we could talk to under 16s about sex without getting explicit consent from their parents. This is why we didn't need to get parental permission to give them and we would literally fill out forms that said this is why I've assessed this person as Gillick competent, and therefore I have given them free condoms because I believe that was the way of preventing them from getting pregnant or getting an STI. So this is really a foundational idea within kind of I guess what you might call children's healthcare, and particularly within sexual healthcare, and it's really, really important. Genuinely, it is. We can all joke about all the stupid ways in which people try and use abstinence only stuff to kind of prevent people getting pregnant or getting STIs or whatever. But we know that things like distributing condoms and serious sex education are how we prevent people from getting pregnant too young or getting STIs, and actually as well kind of doing consent education, all that sort of stuff. Really, really important stuff. But if you are saying that an under 16 cannot consent to using gender-affirming care, particularly hormone treatment, you fundamentally undermine the basic principle of Gillick competency, which is that an under 16 who is competent to do so can consent to their own healthcare decisions without parental oversight. And that is, to me, has been abundantly clear that you cannot say under 16s can't use hormone replacement therapy without undermining the concept of Gillick competency completely, right? That is, I think, to me, has always been quite obvious, and was validating to see Amnesty come to the same conclusion, which is that this is fundamentally an anti-Gillick competency thing. And that, again, as we've talked about for a while, the ultimate aim of the conservative Christian organisations here is to undermine the right to abortion, right? This is, and actually, I think sometimes that's one of the most distressing things for me, is that I think a lot of these organisations don't even care about trans issues that much. It is just a wedge issue to get to what they really want, which is taking away the right to an abortion.
Well, and actually, that isn't actually what they want either, because abortion rights in themselves are a wedge issue, and the kind of whole process of trying to get rid of them started as a wedge issue. What they want is the consolidation and concentration of power to the right. That's what they want.
Yeah. And actually thinking about that as an analogy, you know, when you've got a massive bit of stone that needs splitting and you put in those nails and you hammer it in gradually each time, and you take it in turns, hammering each nail. And that's a bit like what they're doing to get that power. They're trying to get that big bit of stone and break it for themselves.
I think this is the most masculine image I've ever had of you, Jonny.
I was going to say, you managed to convince me you've done a day's manual labour in your life there. That was incredible.
Blue hair disappears and it all comes out. Right?
I know.
Yeah. But yeah, I think you're actually right. There's that power element. And there's something very distressing to me about actually they don't even really give that much of a shit about trans rights either way. It's just a way of getting where they want to go. Like, you almost at least the gender criticals are true believer nut jobs. Like, but these conservative Christian groups, they couldn't actually care less.
Yeah.
They want power.
I mean, I think a lot of the people in them, sort of certainly at a lower level, do, but the people, the higher ups who are actually making the policy decisions and that kind of thing, are doing so because it's a political thing rather than a sort of ideological thing, right? I think they are creating a wedge issue that then some people who exist and work within these organizations absolutely do believe, but it's just that the only reason they really believe that is because of this whole process that we've been talking about, right?
And then we come back to that media angle from Amnesty, right? Of actually how that media has been a shockingly willing partner in creating an atmosphere of hostility to trans rights, and has probably mostly unwittingly, but definitely actively been promoting the interests of very conservative Christian groups in the US.
It's interesting as well that, you know, saying about under 16s not having access to affirming care, but you can be under 16 and apply to join the army. Like, which one is a bigger deal then? Like, someone that can advocate for their own body and, you know, just their own experience as an individual, or joining an institution that's going to be going out and murdering people?
But at least when you get blown to bits in the army, you've got blown to bits in the right sort of body, right? That is the important thing, isn't it? Like, I
mean, I feel like that would be quicker affirming healthcare. Just, you know, blow up the right parts of you. It would be a lot easier.
Just gender affirmation surgery via IED is our new proposal. Like,
it would probably be easier to navigate than the health service.
Yeah.
And do you know, that's actually a really good point that I think is worth mentioning here, right? Is that, like, it's not like we were living in some sort of utopian situation where trans health, you know, you read this stuff and it's, you know, well, you know, you turn 13 and you immediately get offered which of the particular hormone therapy treatments would you like, right? Like, there's a sense that, like, we were just chucking out, you know, gender affirming treatment like candy, and actually it's, you know, very much a very difficult thing even before this, right? Like, navigating that system has always been exceptionally, and some would suggest intentionally, unpleasant.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't an easy process to go through. Like proving that you were living as, you know, the gender that you felt for 2 years, and then getting all of that. And yeah, even just changing my gender on my passport was just an absolute nightmare, going to London trying to do that. Like, I think people, you're right, Ben, think it's almost like Oprah, like, you know, you get hormones. You know, it's not like that. It's intentionally done really difficult. You know, when I went to get on the wait list to have surgery, I was at Charing Cross, and, you know, they told me how long it was going to be then. And they, you know, this was in 2014. And at that point, they were saying it was about a 2-year wait list, which now it's ridiculously longer than that. You know, we're talking, decades now, the wait list. And I was really fortunate and very privileged, I recognize, to be in the position where I was able to go private. A lot of people aren't in that position.
And it's been made harder as well. I think it's interesting. I think one of the things the report also makes very clear that relates to this is that, as we say, things have become so much harder. But the Gender Recognition Act, when that came in 2004, as the report says, that was seen as kind of like revolutionary, like it was a big deal. But it is now considered basically not fit for purpose, but it's horribly out of date. It's not good enough, and yet we're going backwards.
And I think this as well, just to pick up what you were saying, Seb, actually, it is worth potentially talking about this as a class issue, right?
Yeah.
If you have the money, and this is not in any way having to go at you, because why would you not if you were able to do that? But if you have the money, this stuff is still available for you. But actually, if you don't have the money, and we know that because of all the structural oppression, like we know that generally trans people are less financially well off. They're more likely to be in a financially precarious situation, and so I don't want to get caught in thinking about this, I guess, in purely culture war terms. We're talking about a class issue, right? This is as everything is classed, and kind of gender identity is one of the ways in which kind of the division of classes is played out in our society.
Absolutely. You just need to look at the states and then see people like Caitlyn Jenner who are rubbing shoulders with Donald Trump, and think, oh, it's okay, I'm going to be fine. And realistically speaking, besides, recently getting frustrated that the gender marker on her passport has gone back to male, what else is really going to happen to Caitlyn? Like, she's got so much power and influence and money that she's going to be fine either way. But you're right, it's definitely a class issue, because it's those that can't afford things, those that don't have that power, that are the ones that lose out.
And it's interesting you mentioned the passports as well. And I want to touch on this, and then we should probably come towards a close, or it's going to be a huge episode. But I think it is interesting to think about the way that I think the left have had our horizons limited a little bit by the necessity of this fight. And, I was talking to some comrades the other day about how, there's a lot of people that are passionate about trans rights, kind of people who maybe not as far left as some of us, but passionately defending trans rights. But actually, the idea of gender abolition and the idea of moving beyond gender and the end of gender actually just seems to have disappeared as a horizon, because we have got and on one level, there's not a lot we can do about that, because we do need to fight the fight that's in front of us. But it feels like we are back to fighting for kind of the most basic liberal compromises around like access to gender affirming care, and that's really important. But the horizons we're fighting for have shrunk, I guess, as a result of this fight.
Yeah, it's a safety issue now.
Yeah. And it's right. It's right that we're doing that, right? I don't think there's anything else we can do but fight for people's rights and safety. But it has inevitably stopped more radical demands in some ways.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is probably intentional. The bad actors will be doing this intentionally.
I mean, it comes back to that whole "it's a wedge issue for a reason" kind of thing, doesn't it? What do they really want?
I'm going to draw us to a close, Matt. Anyone have anything they want to touch on that we haven't talked about?
I think I want to recommend the Philosophy Tube video called "I Emailed My Doctor 133 Times," because she uses her experience of navigating like gender affirming care on the NHS and uses it to make the point about NHS privatization as well, like and how all of these, there's a reason it's taking longer and longer and longer, and why we're all being forced to do things privately, and why that kind of point you made earlier, both of you, about this being a class issue is actually only becoming and going to become a more common thing. And I can say from my own experience with trying to navigate these services for various issues, I'm I've dealt with a lot of these privatized services, or services that have been deliberately defunded and made deliberately bad so that you have to go private, or use right to choose and essentially go private on the NHS's buck. And it's really not good, and we have to fucking fight this shit because it's really, really bad. I can only tell you from my kind of personal limited experience of navigating these systems. We need to get rid of this awful kind of wave of privatization that we've seen over the last 40 or more years, particularly now with people like Wes Streeting kind of coming in and doing it by steroids. A name we haven't mentioned yet on this episode, and maybe we were hoping we wouldn't have to, but sorry about that.
You brought him up anyway.
Yeah.
Just a horrible, horrible little man who is unfortunately our brother in Christ.
It might be yours.
And I think that's possibly, but actually, and I don't want to get into it, but revealing maybe of, we're talking about a gay Christian man who at one point was kind of broadly, if not particularly enthusiastic supporter of trans rights, who has possibly for reasons of his own ambition kind of gone very heavily against trans rights.
We're streeting ambitious, Ben. Come on.
But I think both his queerness and his Christianity are probably important factors in sadly important factors in how he's ended up in the place he has, right?
I mean, can you baptize a weasel?
Well, if it's a true weasel,
the Methodist Church, they want any numbers they can get.
But I mean, if they're a real weasel, then they'll be free from sin and they won't need to be baptized. So that would be the official.
So Wes Streeting is free from sin.
Is that what you're saying, Adam?
On that note.
I think we probably will draw things to a close there. Then I think we could probably, all of us, rant for several more hours about the state of all of this stuff. But I think we will call it there. Seb, thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. Do you have anything you want to plug in this section?
I mean, not so much plug, just more of a reminder for any listeners. Like, if you've got anyone who's trans or gender non-conforming in your life, like, just go and check on them. Like, there's nothing wrong with sending a text, sending a call, just I'm thinking of you. It goes a long way. The worst that's going to happen is they say, why? But realistically, no, it's a really nice thing to try and do. So I'd encourage everyone to, just check on, see how everyone's doing.
Yeah. Jonny, how are you doing? You all right? Right, there you go. Job done.
Yeah.
Jonny, anything you want to plug or mention?
I just encourage people to read that Amnesty report. And as Adam says, the Philosophy Tube video, she's very articulate in her experience. I think generally trying to hear and be attentive to people's experiences is so important with stuff like this, especially when they're so absent from the conversation. So, be attentive.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's, that media analysis makes it clear that trans lives, experiences and voices are not in this conversation. So anything you can do to actually bring that balance is really worth doing. Adam, where in the world can people find you?
You can find me on various platforms, TikTok, Instagram, some others probably at Commie, XIAN.
Brilliant. You can find all of the contact details for this podcast at breadandrosaries.com. If you have any thoughts, suggestions, ideas, or even complaints about anything Adam has said, which we now have had a guest on specifically to complain about what Adam's been saying, then you can get in touch with us with all the contact details on that website. We do love to hear from people, so please do get in touch. And if you want to chuck us some pennies to keep the podcast running, there it is all the details of our Patreon that will include Adam's upcoming podcast series responding to every episode of the Evangelical Alliance podcast. If you want to chuck some pennies, all that details are on there. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. Thank you so much, Seb, for joining us. And we will see you next time. Goodbye, everyone.
See you later.
Bye.